Hi, and welcome to the Stella Natura office at Spikenard Farm Honeybee Sanctuary. I am Neelima, and that is Donna. But at any rate, we are here today to introduce you to this novel method of journaling that I personally have found very helpful when I'm learning about a new topic that has the potential to get super expansive, to involve a lot of moving parts or different points of things that I find fascinating. So we know the starry sky already has a reputation for being expansive, and we know that we want our research and our time together to have plenty of space to live and expand further. So this is one way that we can accommodate that expansion as we make new discoveries and connections, and hopefully it's great. Okay, so I've rigged myself a little stand so I can film all by myself. First thing that you want is a blank notebook. The most important thing is that it should feel really good to you and have no lines. It's okay if it's this thick art paper that you could draw on without any page numbers, or if it's this more thin sort of journaling paper that does have page numbers. We will use the page numbers, so we can write them in as we go. So this method borrows elements from a journaling method popularized in 2013 by Ryder Carroll, and he called it bullet journaling, though I'm kind of interested in something else to call it by. But the part that we are borrowing is the method of indexing as you go, which allows us to be able to be very free-flowing with our content and simultaneously be able to organize it as we go in such a way that we can find and add on to categories over the course of the year. Even if we're taking notes from, say, related readings, if you're like me, I'm reading 6 books at a time, or if you're making your own observations, or super important, jotting down questions as you go. So that brings us to the index itself. Now, I like to leave a few blank pages at the beginning of the book and then start my index pretty early on. And I'm going to suggest 4 main categories and then 2 subset categories. And you'll leave a lot of space in between these, and you'll see why as we go. So first things first, I like to put questions. We're going to be really working with the questions. As they come to you, just jot them down. And then in between sessions, you can share them with us or in the Padlet. And this is really important because we're doing research together, and that means finding those questions that are they're really valuable, our questions. So let's have a space to write them down. Observations, of course, will be new discoveries that you're making as you go along. And tracking planets is something we'll probably start with as maybe you want to keep track of where the sun and moon are coming up, or how long the lengths of day are, or maybe you want to track all the planets. But we'll go into that a bit more in a little bit. Session notes, whether you're someone who takes notes a lot, almost studiously, or whether you're relaxing with colored pencils in hand as we talk, those session notes could be really helpful because later you may go through and choose to add things that you took in your notes into different places. So for instance, if someone says something really fascinating about Venus or fishes during our first session, you might want to put that fascinating thing in its own section. So it's pretty amazing how doing it this way allows for patterns to emerge that are much more difficult to see if you're just rereading notes or if you write them down and put them away. You know, this engaging with the stars kinds of involves looking up at the sky and looking down at our hands as we take this human action of recording it and working with what it is that we see. And that sort of helps anchor the living experience very much more than just simply reading it. So speaking of, if someone said something fascinating about Venus and the fishes, this brings us to why it's a great idea to add the index of the planets and the index of the constellations, which we'll look at next. Okay, so as I'm turning from my main index to my index of the planets, you'll notice they are separated by a few pages, and that I put a lot of space between each category, and that's because these page numbers will start filling up soon. So I have an index of the planets, and a couple pages later I have my index of the constellations. And what I've done is I've assigned about 4 pages to each one. In other words, I have 4 pages assigned to questions. And I'm leaving these blank for now, but as you'll see that we'll knit them together and weave them together in a way that works really beautifully. So 4 for observations, 4 for, see, I have the freedom in this now to turn it sideways if I wish, or work with different colors. See here, I've decided to track the planets by putting all the planets across the top of the page in a different color for each day of the week. And I might, over time, notice that a pattern emerges. This one's really fun to do on a blackboard, too. But then, for example, in this one, I drew my directions and then where I was seeing the sun coming up with a little compass, where I was seeing it come up and when. But I sort of lost track of it and stopped writing down when they actually set. So that didn't turn out to be my most useful gathering, but had I been participating, maybe it would have worked better. And then session notes and so forth. So now that I have the book set up so that each of my primary sections and each planet and each constellation has 4 pages assigned to it so I can fill as I go, now this really starts to take off. So for instance, if I look at my session notes and see we had a solar eclipse today, a lot of planets are in Pisces, Venus is in retrograde. Well, that might spark me to say, I want to write down something about Venus. So I'll go back to my index of planets, look up Venus, starts on page 42. And then if I take myself to 42, then I can see everything I've already written down about Venus and add that during this day it was retrograde. Well, what else do I notice that I've already written there? Venus can either be the morning or the evening star. It's on an 8-year cycle. And look, I've already written it goes retrograde every 18 months for about 40 days. So that might spark a research question. Like, when was the last time it was retrograde? And when will it be retrograde next? And have I noticed anything in the patterns of at the different times, especially if you're active on the farm or with the bees and birds? What do you notice? Another great thing, early morning, it's either the morning or the evening star. Now, is that something that I understand intrinsically in my own being, something I've always known? Or am I still wondering exactly how I would explain that? Or what did our ancestors or forebears think when they looked at the sky and would notice sometimes it's there in the morning and sometimes it's there in the evening? Do we understand it in our own being, or is that something that we want to look into a little bit further? All ways of working with research. So at any rate, here we are, and making connections about how we can move our information from one place to another. And you see, like, every time I run across something fascinating about Venus, I'll add it here. And it may not take me long to fill up 4 pages, just like I've done back in the planets. Let's talk about that for a second. Okay, so we know that I assigned myself 4 pages for keeping track of my planets, and that I've definitely run out of page because I've decided to get really artsy on this page, right? So the next step is, how do I connect this thread with where I want to go next? Okay, so if I come down here to the very bottom of my page where it's already numbered 27, or if I was using blank pages, I might be writing the numbers as I go. But the next step is I'm going to take my pen and draw a partial circle around this number 27. And what this is telling me is that this is not just going to continue on to the next page. It's going to be a connecting thread with some other part of the book. And so then I just start flipping through. Let's show you where I am. Oops, sorry about that. By the way, I use these little metal fobs for my notebooks, and there are lots of different things a person could use. The little sticky notes that they sell, or paper clips, or pieces of tape. But at any rate, this is the last category that I have, and I've gotten all the way to fishes. Here's my first blank page, and that blank page is number 106. So similarly, I'm going to draw a little circle around my 106. And to the left of my 106, I'm going to write the number 27, because that's the page that I'm coming from. And then I'll go back to 27. Where's my 27? Here's my 27. And to the right of my 27, I'll write 106. So that's telling me where I'm going. So then my next step, of course, is to come back to my index, and where it says tracking planets, I'll draw a comma and then 106. And in this way, you'll keep a running thread in your index of every single one of these aspects that fascinate you. Questions, observations, tracking planets, etc. And by all means, feel free to add your own categories, whatever catches your attention or your fancy as you go on with these things. You may discover that certain things just really catch your attention and fascination, and you'll wind up dedicating dozens of pages to it at a time. And others maybe aren't where your interest lies, and you stop dedicating pages to them. All of that's totally fine. What is interesting is to see how the patterns begin to emerge, and where you want to take things, there's space for it to happen in your journal. So that's pretty much it. If you have questions, please pop them in the Padlet. And in the meantime, have a lovely day. We'll see you there. I'll leave you with one last shot of our little friends out the window. Have a great afternoon with love from Spikenard. Bye for now.